How's it going, family? Good morning. I'm just going to share. I don't know if all of you were here last week, and so I feel like the introduction needs to be done a few times when you begin a new message series. And so this whole process of a resetting that God is doing in my heart, and the cool thing was like, when I came back from vacation, I was talking to PK, and the resetting was happening in his heart as well. So it was a really powerful thing that's happening in my life. And so during vacation, I had some time to meditate about my life. And one of the things I realized was that, like, how in a hurry I was and how rushed I was. There was always like anxiety because I'm always busy. And then I was realizing like why so in a hurry, Julian? Like, you're on vacation right now. Like, you're going nowhere right now. You know, the ocean, you're going to go surfing and the ocean's going to stay there. And so why are you so like anxious? And so then I started realizing like that like maybe I'm a little addicted to being busy and being in a hurry and overwhelming myself with the number of tasks that I try to pile and do all in one day. And then like the list kept going and going, and I realized then that I was becoming, or maybe I had became a human doing instead of being a human being. And this whole reset started that I even like, then I started thinking for the first, beginning of the vacation, like, what is even a human being? I don't even know what it is to be a human being. I know how to be a human doing and do a lot of things and do and multitasking. I'm really good at multitasking, guys. I can drive and reply to text messages on the stoplights and like do stuff and answer phone calls but then I'm overwhelmed. Then I am like living life on fumes. This close to snapping out, like out of like, or it could be out of the government, it could be out of people that cut me off, or wife or kids, because when you're running on fumes, you're this close to snapping out. And so I made a list. What's a human being, who I am? And then, what do I want to become, which is the human doing? And so I put a list together. It's on the slide. On the left, you have the Julian human doing, probably for the past, I don't know, decade of my life, or 20 years or 30. I don't remember being a human being. And so a human doing lives a frantic, busy life, where a human being creates a new rhythm to do less and be more. A human doing is not present. It's not present with God. It's not really present with people. It's not present with the environment or nature. It's not present. It's just so busy, so busy. There's no time to be present. Like we eat lunch and we finish lunch, and after 30 minutes, we don't remember what we had for lunch. Have you ever been there? Okay, I'm not alone. And then a human being is present with God, present with people, and present with the places and environments. And human doing is overwhelmed. A human being is peaceful. A human doing is running in fumes and feeling empty spiritually, emotionally, energy-wise. And a human being is living out of fullness. Human doing is close to burning out. A human being rests and operates out of that rest. A human doing is unaware of their inner life. There's no time, right? There's no time to think about, like, what are you feeling, Julian? What's bothering Julian? No, just keep doing. Just keep doing. And then, anyways, there's no time to know what's happening here. And a human being is aware of what's happening in their hearts. A human doing is exhausted, and it's trying to control everything and everyone. That's why we pray so much for God to change our spouse and our boss and the government and stuff like that. because they all got to better act the way we want them to act. And so we're exhausted trying to control the universe. And a human being is surrendered to God because He runs the world. A human doing is trying to change others and praying for God to do it for me, change them for me, God. And a human being is taking a look within and asking God, God, change me, help me. A human doing is using the wrong scorecard. And here's the wrong scorecard for us as Christians. It's keeping up with the Joneses. That's the scorecard. You know, and it's sad to say, we're going to talk about later in this series that we as Christians, we adopted like 10 or 12 things that are winnings, are victories. And if we're not having those 10 or 12 things, that is like, you got to graduate, you got to go to a good college, and you got to find a job, and then you get married at a certain age, and you have this many kids, and then you travel this much, and you buy this many toys, and you own a house, and then rentals, because the Joneses are getting richer and richer. I don't know if you realize it, because keeping up with the Joneses in the 80s and 90s when I grew up, it was like your neighbors. Now the Joneses are online. And then we're watching the guy with the Lambo and the guy with the Ferrari and the best trips and all the traveling and all the fun things they do and all the good meals and all that. And we're like, the Joneses are getting richer and richer. And we are, sadly, myself included, okay? I'm the one, the reset started with me. We're like, oh man, God's not blessing me because He's not giving me those 10 or 12 marks of victory, when maybe that has nothing to do with what God has for us. And then we're thinking that God is failing us and my Christianity is failing and all of that. No, we're just trying to keep up with some boxes and a scorecard that became a template for every human being. And then we apply that in the church, and God accidentally becomes a genie God that now it's His job to give us those 10 or 12 things in our timetable. Are you feeling me so far? And so we're using the wrong scorecard. A human being is living now, a Christian, right? Living by God's scorecard. That comes later in this series. My rant was just a little preview for you to get excited. And there's so much in my heart, guys, that is sometimes it's even hard to plan for a message, because it's like, God, like I have a billion things to say, because it's so good what God is doing in my heart and in so many levels. It's like, how can you boil down to one thing into like 25 minutes? But anyways, I'll try it. I'll promise I'm trying. Okay. And then we human doings, we're stuck in bad habits. We are worshiping idols in our hearts. And we're stuck in addictions. And we're not living in freedom, the freedom that Jesus died to give us. Now, a human being is aware of those things that try to enslave and imprison, aware of the bad habits, and we're going after freedom. And a human doing is never feeling that is enough or that it has enough. But a human being, son and daughter of God, is enough and has enough, and it's thankful. So I felt like the next slide is the robot coming out, the person. I felt like I was living like a robot coming out of I was a human being stuck in a shell of a robot, and that's that's the image that I feel like it's what's happening with me in this reset. It's like boom, breaking the human doing, and now finding out what is to be a human being, and it's super exciting and super challenging. I feel like my faith took a new, like I was born again. And then I feel like there's a new wind on my sail. I feel my relationship with God is being refreshed and renewed. I've been challenging good ways by the living God. And man, it's a revolution. that is happening in my heart, and I pray that throughout this series, it would just overflow in your hearts as well, and you'll be challenged by those things. We don't want to live life. Can you go back to the slide of human beings and human doings? Like, I was looking at this list, and I was like, God, I really, really want the right side. I really, really do, God. I'm not playing around here, and it will boil down. It always boils down of how much you want something and how much I want something, right? When I went to college, I got saved in my last year of college. It took me 5 years to finish college because I kept changing my majors. Like, I couldn't decide what I wanted. And so, but I remember, because I was not a Christian for the first 4 years, I was cheating a lot. I had the notes, and I didn't learn. College had so much to give me, but I got only so little because I was there just to get C's, because C's gets degrees, right? And I wanted a paper, but be honest, I didn't learn much. And so same can be for church in this. I pray that this is not just a message for you. I pray that you get out of this Sundays and our time together going God, I want this for my life. I really do. I really, really do. And it's going to be very challenging, family, because we're so stuck in our doing and so stuck in our ways. And it's very challenging and very liberating in so many levels. Whoa, oh man, I wish I could give everything. But anyways, nothing changes if nothing changes. Right? It's an old saying in church. And being the human doing, I know the results. I don't want that anymore, ever, for my life. And Marianne, you very nicely sent me an email, and I appreciate the email. And Marianne came to me and she said, "You know what's happening to you, Julian?" And she walked out very lovingly. She was not putting me down. She's like, "I think you're getting this becoming a human doing because we get those things when we're getting older. That's when we realize." So she called me old, and I took that as a compliment. And I love you, Marianne, still. But anyways, but it's kind of true. It's kind of true. We go after so many really shallow things for so long, even as a Christian, and since we start getting a little reason with God, and maybe it is age, and I hope you guys would wake up way before I did, that you don't have to be my age to wake up to those things. And let me tell you my age, and I promise I'm not bragging. It's because you'd be like, oh, whatever. I'm almost 50, guys. I know I don't look. I go to pastor's gathering. They're like, oh, you're what, 32, right? No, whatever. And so I hope you're not almost 50 to wake up to those things and those realities. I hope this reset can start with you in your 20s and 30s. And so here's the big reset. So trying to break up, right? Last week we talked about Martha and Mary. The being versus the human doing. The human being was, one was being with Jesus, and the other one was, Martha was just busy, and Mary was being with Jesus. And today we're going to try to talk about something else. And this is something that is it's very misunderstood in the church, and it was very misunderstood by me as well, which is the topic of prayer. Let's talk about prayer. And I have to start with, we're going to have to be honest with ourselves when we talk about prayer. Prayer. When you think about the word prayer, what comes to your mind? What comes to your mind when you think about the word prayer? And I'll give you 5 seconds to think about that, and then I'll share my heart. So I'll share my heart. If you ask me that question, I'll be first one is talking to God. Prayer is talking to God, Pastor. Okay. Prayer is something that I have to do, because the Bible tells me that I have to do. See, that became a task right there. I'm just being honest. This is how I used to view it. Like, man, it's like prayer is talking to God. It's something that I have to do. And instantaneously, prayer became a task. And if we're going to be honest, if prayer is a task, and if we see prayer as a task, it becomes kind of like that. Unless you're really good at tasks and you're really good at, like, every day looking like almost the same, and you're going to do well with that. But most of us, and I speak for myself, that's why we do very little of it. And I'm not saying very little of it because I used to say things like, but I talk to God all day long. I am in the camp of like that I don't stop to pray. I am in the camp that I pray without ceasing. I pray all day long. Okay, we're going to talk about that because that was me. But then, in our prayer, in our moment with God, we're just doing all the talking, right? We're doing all the talking. And I've been to a lot of prayer meetings at OB1 and outside and prayer gatherings. Prayer in the circles of church is pretty similar. Father, thank you for being here. Then we start asking, bless this service and bless this and be with me and give me wisdom. And then we do a lot of talking. And in the talking, we do a lot of asking. So far, so good? Am I alone? Am I alone here? And then, in the tasking, and that's why, because it's a task that we have to do, and sometimes, if you're a multitasker like me, you do it on the go, but you do it with the busy. You do it as another doing of the human doing on top of the doings. And so the multitasking prayer is I call it Jesus on the go, okay? Because that's what I'm talking to myself, like a task. And that's why it becomes then stale. And that's why we are in a hurry, praying in a hurry. And then we are frustrated because God is not changing my boss, and God's not changing my spouse, and He's not changing the government. Then we're frustrated, but then we come to church one day, and then there's a message or a Bible verse read about perseverance, right? And then we go like, okay, let me go back to starting the same stale cycle again. I don't know how is your prayer life. I'm asking you this just so you can do like a self-reflection right now. It's not for guilt. It's not for guilt, because I'm talking about me. And if I am a pastor and I was this way, I can only imagine that most of us are this way as well. Like, how's your prayer life, right? Like, is it like hurried? Is it very little? Is Jesus on the go? It's a lot of asking. Very little reflection, self-reflection. What is your prayer life like? And so one of the things that needed to be reset in my heart is prayer. And I hope by the end of my last, 10 minutes I have or so, that we would leave out of this place with a fresh way of viewing prayer. That's not a task, that I'm not obligated to do it, that is stale, somewhat shallow and repetitive, that I'm treating Jesus as if Jesus was my personal secretary or a genie god or Santa Claus in disguise. I know I needed that reset. And so we have to see as prayer as much broader than I just described. It's much wider. It's much richer than those things that I described and those things that maybe we have been doing. It's much richer. So I went to the dictionary just for funsies. And I said, what's the definition of prayer? And one of the definitions, the breakthrough started with the definition of prayer. The definition says, it's spiritual communion with God. Wow. spiritual communion with Jesus. Spiritual communion with the one that loves us and died for us on the cross. Spiritual communion. That's not a task anymore. That falls in the human being category instead of doing category. Is I want to be with the Holy Spirit. I want to spend time with God. From human being to God being. From being to being. Not a doing person that hopes he helps me in my doing. That changed already everything in my heart. I'll continue. I have more message, okay? But I feel like I could just stop right now. If you got this, I think you got the heart of it. It's from a being connecting with a being. We can apply this analogy to marriage, if you think about. If I go like, hey, husband, wife, you guys are not getting along? Why don't you guys go for a walk together? That's a task, Pastor. That's a chore. Oh, being with one another is a chore? I like to do my own thing, and she can do her own thing. No. How about you guys are being with one another? Even if it's doing a task that you don't really love, but you do that task that you don't really love because you love being with that person. Are you with me? So, am I alone? Let me give you the example. My example is, not every day, I'll say twice a week, I come home and my wife is like, hey, thanks for coming home. And I'm ready to just get in the cave, which is the home, and go like, I got home. I'm not leaving this place now. You know, dinner's here, the couch is here, everything I want is here. Are you with me? And then my wife's like, let's go for a walk. I don't like that doing, but I like being with her. Are you with me? So what I'm trying to say here is that if it's a task, we're going to lose the pleasure of doing, and it's going to get stale, this and that. But if it's like we choosing, man, I want to be with you, God. I want to be in your presence, God. Fill me with your love. Fill me with you, God. From being to being. That was, to me, the breakthrough. Then I realized why Daniel and the King David, they prayed 3 times a day. I'm 48 and almost saved for like over 20 years, like 23 years, 24 years almost. Like I only got it now. It's not like they had another task to do 3 times a day. And on top of everything we do, there's more things for you to do. No. We're going to do less. We're going to do less so that we can be more. And let's read it in the Psalm and in Daniel. So in Psalm, as for me, I will call upon God, and the Lord shall save me. Evening and morning at noon, I will pray and cry out loud, and he shall hear my voice. I want to be with God. In their case, 3 times a day. And I'm shooting that as my goal. I'm failing miserably because a human doing in transition to becoming a human being, sometimes I do it once a day. Sometimes I do it twice a day. Sometimes I am being able to do it 3 times a day. And it's not because nothing is stopping me from doing that. It's just sometimes when I see it, it's just, I didn't do it at noon, and during lunch, before lunch, or after lunch, or during lunch. I didn't do it. And it's dinner time. And then I'm like, all right, we're going to do it. And then sometimes something happens, and that happens, and that happens. And it's 10 o'clock. And sometimes I don't do it at night too. But this is my goal. I don't know what your goal is. My goal is I want to be with God. And this is not like legalistic. It's not a rule. The heart is, I want to be with God. We talk a lot in church about not doing life in our own strength. We want to do life in God's strength. Right? And when we are spending time with God, let's read Daniel too. Daniel, the whole decree of like whoever worships, you can only worship the statue. You cannot worship any other God. And he goes, and he went in his upper room with his windows open towards Jerusalem, and he knelt down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, and as was his custom since early days. So he had a custom to go to God's presence, and it made sense to me why Jesus would stop to pray. If we go deeper in the prayer, he went to spend time with God. Now he went away to do a task. That's the life-changing piece of this message. And one thing that I am integrating in my prayer life, and if you study like church history, and it's not like I'm a church history buff, but that's one of the things that people did it for centuries, and it was a little lost, which is silence. To be quiet in God's presence. When I said, let's be honest, our prayer life, we're mostly talking, and when we're talking, we're mostly asking. Am I alone? And so I am learning about this thing called silence, and I know very little about it. It's something you start like a few months back. It can't really go and say I'm an expert at it. But I'm finding some really powerful things. And let me tell you something about this new thing that I'm challenging you to do. So, Pastor, what are you challenging me to do? I'm challenging you to wake up 10 minutes earlier, or let's say you don't check social media, whatever. However you're going to carve time in the morning so that you can be 5 minutes with God. Try that, but not on the go. Not on the go. I used to be like, oh, good morning, Jesus, making coffee. Here's my toast. God, Jesus, I love you. No, really sitting down for a minute and just going like, God, I want to be with you. How about 5 minutes of the vine and the branches? Those who abide in the vine are going to be the ones that will produce much fruit. And so I just want to sit down and abide. And you're going to see how we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to do it. It's awkward. You're alone in the living room feeling awkward. And no one's watching. You're like, oh, this is awkward. Like wow, how you do it? How you start this? We don't know how to do it. But doing? Oh, yeah. Oh, we know how to do the do's. And it ends up being a bunch of doo-doo, right? I just love saying that. So thank you for putting up with me. "10 minutes, you're like, man, I'm like, oh man, maybe the kids are going to wake up. My wife's going to come down like, oh, this is so awkward. This is so strange. Then we get distracted. Then a thought comes like, oh yeah, coffee. This is happening on my day. We don't know how to be silent, quiet, and be in His presence. But then the challenge is to learn this thing. We're not going to throw it away because it's hard or challenging. It's hard and it's challenging. There's 1,000 aspects of silence that I'm learning, and I'm going to list a few here. But silence, it's precious. It's powerful. Being with a being. I'm going to be with God. And it's going to be very unique, very your experience, and there's no right or wrong. I'm not going to give you a recipe on how to do it, but it's powerful because it's now being with a being, and you're going to see how much we don't know how to be. It's like, wow, I just don't know how to sit down for 5 minutes and be. It's kind of shocking. And then I'm learning like so many things, like that to be quiet in His presence is worship. Because I want to be with you, God. I want to be with you right now. It's a form of worship. We think worship is just singing. No, it's a form of worship. I want to be with God. It is connecting with God. It is not doing anything. That's like, you feel so powerless when you're there not doing anything. You're like, I gotta do. The day is slipping through my fingers, God. But in that moment of like powerlessness, you remember who's running the universe. Because you were sleeping for 6 or 7 or 8 hours and He was still running the universe. So control, it's funny how 2 minutes of silence, control, the God of control, the idol of control, loses a little bit of a grip every time we do it from our hearts. Because at that moment, you feel exactly who you are and exactly who I am. I am not God. I want to control everything now, God, but now I can't. You are God, and I am not, and you run the universe. It gives time for God to speak something. God, do you have anything to say? It gives time for you to worship. God, I love you. I pray these prayers that are very weird because I'm learning these things. I'm like, feel me, God, feel me. I say this thing and you can say it too, okay? It's not only my prayer. You can say, God, if you're going to fill anyone in the whole world with your love, would you fill me first? And you can say that too. So it's not like God's like, oh, sorry, Julian did it first, you know? You see what I'm saying? God, if you're gonna help somebody today, with grace, love in your heart, would you do that to me first? Because as I am filled with God, and I'm abiding and connecting to the vine, and I am the branch and all of that, that overflows in such a powerful way. And I'll finish up with this. The power now that is behind it is this, that I'm going to read the Bible with a different set of eyes. It's not a task anymore now to do my devotion. It's like I'm already being with Him. I'm being with Him. I'm going to continue to be with Him now. It's not a task anymore. Because unfortunately in church, if we're comparing who's better at tasks, the better Christian will be the one who's better at tasks. But is that Christianity really? Or is that a relationship with the living God? And so the power to like, oh man, I try to help everybody too much, and in my attempt to help my wife and my kids, they're like, it's annoying to them. Like, my wife is cooking. Oh, let me help you. Can I help you? She's like, no, don't help me. Let me cook. Go away. Let me just do all the cooking today. Like, my daughter goes like, oh, this is happening in my school. Like, oh, I have something to say about that. Instead of just like, hey, do you want me to say anything about that? And anyways, like when you surrender control, it's beautiful what happens, because you remember that God is God, and your kids are in God's hands, and your wife is in God's hands, and your future is in God's hands. So it's funny what this abiding, the power of the abiding is powerful. I can't put it in words. And then we start living and operating out of that fullness, out of that peace. All because we changed and we carved time to do less and be more with God first. So that's my message, family. It's my message. At the bottom of your handout, if you got one, I put some ideas for you what to do in your 5 minutes with God. I would start with, I think there's a slide too. I think it's one of the last slides. It's a list of things. No? Just go. It's an idea here. It's not religion. We're not talking about religion and check boxes here. But if you're going to sit 5 minutes with God in the morning, 2 minutes lunch, and 5 minutes at night, these are some ideas what you can do. You can take 2 minutes of silence. Like this is great to do like before, in the morning, noon. You can do that. You can, going back from lunch to your office, you just stop at your car and just go like, God, there's still half of the day. I still have meetings. Feel me. Be with me. Give me wisdom, God. And it's a human being with the supreme being of God. You can worship. You can thanks. You can confess. You can surrender. You can do self-reflection. Petition, we're good at it, but I put it there anyways. That you can ask our stuff for ourselves and for others. If you want to, I want to invite you to close your eyes. And for 2 minutes, let's be silent in God's presence. After that, I'll finish up with prayer. God, would you teach us how to be a human being, God? Would you teach us to commune with you, God? You love us so much, God, and we love you so much as well, God. And you are the vine and we are the branches, God. Would you change our minds and hearts about prayer, God, that it's not a task. It's communing with the living God. We need so much of your strength and love and kindness and patience, self-control, God. We need you so much, God. Would you help us, God, to break out of this robotic, exhausting, human-doing kind of life. Help us to set times to be with you. Help us to go through the awkwardness, God. I've been doing this for a few months now, God, and it's still awkward, God. It's still hard. It's still challenging, God. And as a byproduct, God, a lot of tasks are going to be removed because we're going to be doing life out of your power. Being a spouse is not going to be a task anymore. Being a father, like a brother, a sister, a roommate, it's not going to feel everything like it's hard, like a task because we're going to do it in your strength, God. We're going to do it in your love. We love you, God. If you're going to feel somebody today, God, you can repeat that, okay, in your heart. Feel me, God. going to reveal yourself to someone today, God. Reveal yourself to me, God. If someone's going to get to know you a little better today, God, I want to be that person, God. If someone's going to be walking and doing life in such an overflow, God, of love and grace and peace and joy, God, I want that person to be me, God. Give us hunger for you, God. Give us that, God. If we need help even with that, God. Father, I just want to bless everyone that is here, God, in Jesus' name. Make us hungry and thirsty for community with you, God. I can't wait to hear the stories, God. I can't wait to hear what everyone's experiencing, God, by simply communing with you. I can't wait to hear, God. I can't wait to hear about the breakthroughs, God. I can't wait to hear, God. Because I see they're happening in my life, God. I feel like in the past 6 months, I became such a better husband and dad, God, that before I was trying to do it in my own strength, God. So I thank you, God, for being faithful and being so good to us. We love you, God. We praise you. In your name we pray, and everybody says, amen.